Today, I have 3 builds that get the most out of the new Stasis Shatter Grenade that guarantees high ability uptime and grenade spam. Let's get right into it. The new Shatter Grenade has some pretty cool properties. It's a grenade that sticks to enemies, then explodes into sharp shrapnel that ricochets off of surfaces, which deals damage. It also will instantly explode when hitting a frozen target, dealing bonus damage. This grenade will be the main focus of our builds, but before we jump into the builds themselves, I have a couple of things I want to mention. First, each build will be using Shatter Grenade. That is a given. Next, each build will be using 100 plus grenade stat to get the most out of our grenades. Next, each build will be using the same 2 weapons, being the Vergil's Curved Bow and the Chill Inhibitor Grenade Launcher. The bow will be creating a ton of stasis crystals, getting use out of the artifact perks and fragments that we chose. And our grenade launcher can weaken a boss or champion due to an artifact perk. Your energy weapon is completely up to you. But speaking of artifacts, each build will be using the same artifact and the same artifact perks, which I will go over now. So for the artifact that I went with the Slayer Baron Apothecary Satchel. And the reason for that is because there are a ton of really good stasis artifact perks. The tier 3 artifact perks I chose were Served Cold, which picking up a stasis shard grants you class ability energy, and Brain Freeze. When you freeze a combatant, it creates like a slow field, which is insanely good. For the tier 2, we have Weaken Clear, which when you damage a boss or champion, it weakens them. The next one is Hail the Storm, shattering frozen targets and stasis crystals deal increased damage, which is insanely good for these builds. The next one is Frost Renewal. While you have Frost Armor, taking critical damage releases a freezing burst, which is really good. For the tier 1s, we have Crystalline Converter. After you activate your class ability, your next stasis weapon Final Blow creates a stasis shard, which does actually feed back into Served Cold, so it's a really good combination. Of course, the last tier 1 artifact perk we have is Wind Chill, which rapid stasis weapon hits grant you stacks of frost armor. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the artifact perks. With that out of the way, let's get straight into the builds. First, we'll start with Titan. Now to start this build off, I'll go over the aspect and fragments that I chose. The first aspect is Howl of the Storm, which when you use your melee during a slide, you will launch stasis crystals forward, and it also grants you an extra melee charge. The next aspect is Tectonic Harvest, which when picking up stasis shards grants frost armor. When you have frost armor, your stasis weapons have a chance to shatter an enemy on kill, which increases that chance the more stacks of frost armor you have. It also grants melee energy when taking damage when you have frost armor. It's a pretty juice aspect, and a little spoiler, I will be using this aspect on the other builds, which do have slight differences, so I will point them out later in the other builds. For the fragments, we have Whisper of Shards to boost our grenade charge rate when shattering a crystal, Whisper of Hunger to increase the melee energy gain from stasis shards, Whisper of Conduction so stasis shards track to our position, and Whisper of Rhyme for the increase in our frost armor stacks and duration. The purpose of these aspects and fragments is to keep our ability uptime high, with the multiple ways to get ability energy gains, and of course for the extra offensive capabilities. But it gets a little spicier when we include the exotic armor, which would be the Inmost Light exotic chest piece, which when you use one ability, it empowers the others, giving them faster regen and damage, which stacks up to 2 times, which changes our ability uptime from pretty decent to absolutely insane. Just look at this clip. In the span of about 30 seconds, we were able to use our melee 7 times, which is pretty dang good. This was only doable because of the aspects, fragments, and exotics that we chose. But where does the grenade make a play? I'm glad you asked, dear viewer. Because when we include the Shatter Grenade, our crystals become absolute nukes. You can even one-shot champions in ultimate difficulty. Here's an example. And I didn't even have the fragment to increase its damage. It's just that good. So with this build, you have insanely high damage and ability uptime. The one thing this build could get more out of is our artifact perks, but to be honest, if you took off the artifact, I don't think it would matter at all. You would mostly lose out on weapon damage, but I do think this next build gets the most out of our artifact perks, which would be the Warlock build. First, we'll jump straight into the aspects and fragments. The first aspect I chose is Frost Pulse, which when you use your class ability, it creates a shock wave that freezes targets, granting frost armor when freezing said targets. It also grants class ability energy when freezing targets, which happens a lot. The next aspect, of course, is Glacial Harvest, which is the same as the Titan Harvest aspect, except this time taking damage while you have frost armor grants grenade energy, which is very inconvenient because we will be using Shatter Grenade a ton in this build, probably the most out of the other two builds. For our fragments, we have Whisper of Fissures, which increases the size and damage of shattering a crystal or target, Whisper of Conduction, allowing shard tracking, Whisper of Torment, which taking damage grants grenade energy, which grants more energy the more frost armor you have, Whisper of Shards, which shattering a crystal boosts grenade recharge rate, and Whisper of Refraction, which defeating slowed or frozen targets grants class ability energy. With these aspects and fragments, we have 3 ways to get our grenade back and 2 ways to get our class ability back, which leads to a ton of ability use. But what if I told you it gets even better? With the exotic helmet, Eye of Another World, we get an improved regeneration speed of all of our abilities. Been a while since we dusted off this one. Don't turn away though, because this exotic gives us an extra 50% improvement on our ability regeneration just by existing, which is no small number, so don't sleep on this exotic. The reason I chose this exotic is because I wanted to abuse all of my abilities, and I think this is the best exotic for the job. So for this build, you will always be able to use your class ability, which freezes everything nearby, and when you freeze them, you can follow up with a Shatter Grenade to deal huge amounts of damage, and shatter everything in sight. And like I said, I believe this build can spam the most amount of Shatter Grenades due to how many ways we can get our grenade back. I also think that it gets the most out of our artifact perks. With the Served Cold artifact perk, we get class ability energy on shard pickup, which do track to your position, so it's easy to get the most out of it. And because we're spamming our class ability so often, we get a lot of use out of the Crystalline Converter artifact perk, which after using a class ability, our next stasis final blow will create a stasis shard, which will feed right back into our class ability, creating a pretty good loop. So with all of that, our artifact, aspects, fragments, and exotics, we have a ton of ability spam with high Shatter Grenade use, which was the whole point of the build. Speaking of ability spam, next we have Hunters. We'll again start with the aspects and fragments. The first aspect I went with was Touch of Winter, which gives our Shatter Grenade extra properties, like having additional shrapnel and hitting a frozen target refunds some grenade energy. The next aspect, of course, is Grim Harvest, which is the same as the previous two, but this time you get class ability energy when taking damage with frost armor. For our fragments, we have Whisper of Shards to get faster grenade recharge rate after breaking a crystal, Whisper of Torment to get grenade energy when taking damage, which scales with frost armor, Whisper of Conduction for shard tracking, and Whisper of Hunger to increase melee gains from shard pickup. So we have lots of ways to get our melees back, with the Grim Harvest creating a ton of shards, giving us melee energy on pickup, and of course using Gambler's Dodge, which gives us melee energy on use. And we can spam it because of our Harvest aspects and Served Cold artifact perk, which is important because of the exotic helmet Mask of Fealty, which improves our Withering Blades. With the helmet, our Withering Blades will create small crystals on hit and refund a portion of melee energy. So when you shatter a frozen target or crystal with Withering Blade, it releases a ton of more Withering Blades, but we mostly just want the first portion of the exotic. With this exotic, you can freeze a target with just having to use 1 melee instead of having to use 2. So it makes it a lot easier to freeze a ton of targets, so you can easily follow up with the Shatter Grenade. And because of the Touch of Winter aspect, we get some of our grenade energy back when hitting a frozen target. With our aspects and fragments, we have a ton of ways to get some grenade energy back. So we create this loop of freezing a ton of targets with our melee, then follow up with a Shatter Grenade. At the same time, we are using our class ability, which gets use out of the Crystalline Converter artifact perk, which as we know makes our next stasis final blow create a stasis shard, which will feed back into our melees and class ability. The one thing I liked most about this build is that it's probably one of the safer options of the 3 builds, being able to throw Withering Blades and Shatter Grenades from a distance, so you don't have to get too close and personal. You would have to go and pick up the stasis shards, but they will track to your position so you don't have to get too close. But other than that, you're still able to spam Shatter Grenades after freezing pretty much everything. So with this build, you have the same ability spam with a little extra Shatter Grenade damage because of the extra aspect properties and the bonus of safe distance. So there you have it. Those were 3 builds that get the most out of Shatter Grenade damage. If I had to choose a favorite out of the 3, I think I'd have to go with Titan. You can be very aggressive with that build, and one-shotting champions is pretty satisfying, but let me know in the comments which of the 3 you'll be using. Or, of course, you can share what Shatter Grenade build you put together. Of course, I know in the last couple of videos you've been asking for dim links. If I am able to, I will leave them in the description. So please check there, and if it is not there, then I was not able to. I apologize. But if you enjoyed my content, please feel free to subscribe and like the video. It helps me out a ton, and I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you later.